Whether you're an aspiring leader, an established executive, an at-home mom, or a young person wanting to grow and learn, Marsha Martin will share actionable strategies for greater happiness, success, motivation, creativity, productivity, love, health, contribution, and fulfillment. Welcome to Talk This Way with your host, Marsha Martin. Marsha will guide you through the basics and unravel the ABCs of communication, leadership, and success by taking the wax on, wax off approach to communication mastery, ensuring that the skills you acquire will make you unstoppable. So now, please welcome the host of Talk This Way, Marsha Martin.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to my show, Talk This Way. I'm your host, Marsha Martin. And this is being live streamed from Bold Brave TV. The purpose of this show is to show you some things that can make you a more effective human being, that your communication skills can accelerate, that your relationships can get better, that your leadership skills can also grow. And tonight, in this episode, we're going to talk about some things in terms of the game of business and life and the moves that you have in the game. Now, we've covered a lot of subjects over the last few episodes, and every Tuesday night at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, you can go to YouTube and just search for Bold Brave TV, Talk This Way with Marsha Martin, and watch the show live. Or you can go there and all of the shows will be archived as well. And we've been talking about how things are created, how you produce a result in this universe, how you communicate more effectively, how you can get people's attention, how you can be more authentic. And tonight we're going to do one of my favorite things, is to teach you a little bit more about language than you might have known before, because language is amazing. But first of all, I want to take this perspective. We did talk about perspective in one of the earlier shows. And depending on what kind of perspective you have, the perspective that you're coming from, your point of view, then that will allow whatever shows up or occurs for you. And I have found one of the most amazing and productive and positive, workable perspectives in life is a game. Business is a game. You're playing a game. When you think of it from a perspective, it's so serious. It's very deep. It's very serious. Sometimes it shows up in such a way that you don't make the right moves. But I've found if you consider this is a game, hey, let's play this the best that we can. Let's play really hard while we're playing, and let's remember it's a game at the end. Usually people play it like it's a game or like it's, not that important. And then at the end of the game, they kind of play it like their life depended on it. And they say, oh no, now I lost. I must be a failure. So I want you to just play it the opposite way. So life is a game, and you have to be able to stand back far enough to see the punchline, because life can also be a joke, right? Except when you're inside of it, it doesn't feel like it's so funny. But when you step back a little bit and you kind of look at what you're doing and how you're being, sometimes you'll find that you'll just start laughing at yourself. Now you have moves in the game, just like Monopoly. And your moves are in language. So I want to talk about language this episode and break some of these moves down. Think about the fact that you have a toolbox. And in the toolbox, you have some tools. And each tool has a job. And if you have a hammer and a saw in your toolbox, then you have a piece of wood. And say that piece of wood is one long piece of wood. And what you want to do is to make it into two pieces. Well, which tool would you use? Would you use the hammer or would you use the saw? I bet everybody said the saw, hopefully. Well, of course you would use the saw. But think about it. Couldn't you just as well use the hammer? You could pound and pound and pound and pound until you had two pieces of wood, right? So it would eventually work. But it's not the tool that allows you to do the job most effectively. It's not built for that particular job. The saw has a purpose and it's made for that purpose. And so it does its job more effectively because it was made for that job. You can still do it with a hammer, but it's pretty messy and it causes all sorts of upsets and mess. What if you wanted to take those two pieces of wood and put them together in a different form and you had a nail to do that? Would you use the hammer or would you use the saw? Well, again, I hope all of you said the hammer, because of course the hammer is the tool that is made for the job. And you could use the saw. You could pound with the saw and pound with the saw until finally, probably with a few cuts and a little blood and a big mess, you could get it done. But you can do it much more effectively if you use the hammer. So language is like that. There are different kinds of language. We call those kinds of language different distinctions. And each distinction in language has a purpose. It has a job to do. And when you know what the job is and how language works, then when you want to produce a particular result, like you want someone to buy something, well, you're going to have to talk them into it. You're going to have to enroll them. Or if you want someone to take action, then you're going to need to use the right distinction in language that generates action, because not all distinctions in language generate action. And if you use the wrong distinction in language, you're going to come out of meetings and say, nothing ever happens in this meeting. And essentially what you're saying is, there was no action. Well, why wasn't there action? Because you didn't use the proper distinction in language. Now, let me explain what a distinction is. A distinction is where you break something apart and you make it distinct from collapsing everything together. So, for example, I've told many of you I am from California, but I spent most of my life in Aspen, Colorado. And in Aspen, when we looked out the window and up in the mountains, we would see this white stuff, and we would call it snow. And snow is a word that collapses every single kind of snow, because there's lots of distinctions, into one word that covers everything. If you break it apart or uncollapse it, and you look at what different kinds of snow that there is, then you'll see, oh, there's a word for powder, there's a word for groomed, there's a word for ice, there's a word for water, there's a word for yellow. You better know what yellow snow is, because you don't want to eat that snow. So there's lots of different kinds of snow, and we can say snow and it covers everything, or we can be more specific and say the distinct word that we have for that particular kind of snow. And it's the same in language. It's so amazing. Most people say, I'm having a conversation. Well, that's like saying there's snow on the mountain. Well, what kind of conversation are you in? There's many different kinds of conversations. Or some people will say, I talked to him or her about that. Well, what language distinction did you use when you were talking? Because when you say I'm talking, it kind of covers everything. Well, today we're going to learn what those distinctions are and what each distinction in language, what the purpose of that particular distinction of language is, so that you know what it does. And then we're going to teach you how to use those distinctions to produce the results that you want in the conversations that you're in. Whether it's that you want to cause somebody to move or act, or you want to enroll someone into your commitment or sell them a product, or you want to clear some space between the two of you because you have an upset and you want to make that upset go away. Well, there's lots of different distinctions in language, and each of them have different jobs to do. And each of those jobs would do one of those things. So you want to know what those distinctions are so you can effectively have the result that you want to produce. Communication is like magic, and we're going to create a toolbox of magical tools. We're going to teach you the tools and the moves in language so you can play the game better. When we come back from the break, I'm going to go through some of those distinctions and tell you what each one does. So this is Marsha Martin. I'm your host of Talk This Way, and we're being live streamed from Bold Brave TV, and I can't wait to go through this all after the break. So see you after the break.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Marsha Martin. I'm your host of Talk This Way, and we're being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. Okay, I talked to you about the distinctions in language. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what they all are, and then I'm going to go through each of them. So if you can see, let's see if I can get this right there. Okay, we've got declaration, request, offer, promise, assessment, assertion, expressive, apology, and complaint. So just like when I said we're going to see some snow, and you could break it down into powder or ice or groomed or ungroomed. These are the different distinctions in language. We call them speech acts. They're actions in language. And each one has a different purpose, and each one produces a different result. Now, it's very interesting because mostly when you listen to people speak, they will use the distinction assessment. Assessment is when you give your opinion. You're saying how you feel about something, you're saying what you think about something, and it's your opinion. It's an assessment of the situation. We'll get into that a little deeper. The point I want to make now, though, is most people spend 90% of what they say talking assessments. And they talk assessments as if it is the real action that's happening. So they'll say, what happened was she was sad. Well, that's not what happened. What happens is what the action is. And then you add meaning to the action. You add your interpretation of what the action means. So if you see somebody crying, that's action. Then you make an interpretation of what that action means. You might say, she is sad. But later, when someone says to you, what happened? You can't say she was sad. That's not what happened. What happened was the action. She was crying. And then you interpreted that what it meant was she was sad. You know, some people cry when they're scared. Doesn't always mean that a person is sad because they're crying. And there are lots of actions that people take where you interpret what you think is happening and you're inaccurate. And it really gets you in trouble if you think your interpretation is what happened. Because then when you report out or you take an action yourself on what needs to be happening next, you're basing it on what you think happened rather than realizing there's two distinctions. There's the world of what you're doing or what is happening or the action. And there's the world of what you have in life, one of which the things that you have is your interpretation of what something means. So mostly people speak in assessments. And if you go through a newspaper, if you start listening to what people are saying to you, if you start listening to yourself, you can find out that 90% of what you're saying is assessments. But we're going to teach you some other kinds of actions and language. So let's start with declaration. Declaration is anything you say that is also what your meaning is, this shall be. This is so. It's kind of you say it as if this is the way it is. This shall be. This is so. We call that a declaration. You're declaring something into existence. Actually, most people don't know this, but language is generative. Language actually creates reality. You're speaking things into existence. There's different states of being that things must go through before they exist in the real world as a real thing. The first state of being is it needs to exist in the invisible world. It needs to be a dream or a visualization or a feeling. All of those things exist in the invisible world. So it will exist as a thought, something you're thinking, something you're feeling first. And then the next stage of it being real in the world is when you speak it. You take it to the next level of its existence, which is the word. And you speak it. And the speaking of it is the bridge between the world where it's being in the world that is invisible to the world that's real or reality. And so we say you speak things into existence. You're living in the world that you created last year by speaking it. You're living in what you spoke a few years ago. If you speak it, what happens is we start turning the way that we act into the funnel that we created going in the direction that we first spoke. And pretty soon, after a lot of different things happen, it becomes real. But we can get into that later. Right now, I want to just go through the distinctions in language. Now, a declaration is something you say as if this shall be, or this is so. For example, you might say, I'm tired. That's a declaration. I can't do this. That's a declaration. This won't work. That's a declaration. This is going to be great. That's a declaration. So you're starting to see what I mean by when you declare something. You're saying, this is so, this is so, this shall be. We call that a declaration. And the purpose of declaration is to bring possibilities into existence. In other words, when you say it, before you said it, it wasn't a possibility. By saying it, it actually creates it in the form of it being a possibility. And a possibility is real as a possibility. I've got a pen here, and this pen is real in the real world as a pen. It's solid. It's a real pen. It exists in reality here. Lots of things exist this way. But because it doesn't exist like this, doesn't mean it's not real. Possibilities are real. They exist as a possibility, but they are real as a possibility. And when you create a declaration, when you declare something, you actually create a possibility. Now, the thing to understand about possibilities is this: they're kind of like tunnels. You ever gone through a tunnel in a car? You go in the tunnel and then you kind of can't go anyplace else except through the tunnel and out the other side. So there's the way you get in and the way you get out. But everything about the tunnel is surrounding you. And that's what a possibility does when you create it. It surrounds you. And as human beings, we have this funny thing that we do. We're thrown to being right. In other words, we automatically want to be right. We automatically are trying to be right. We don't have to think about it. We create ourselves kind of being right. We want to look good, know the answer, and be right. That's what human beings are thrown to. So when you're inside of a possibility that you just created through language, through speaking it, because that's the job of declaration, is it creates possibility, creates a possibility, brings a possibility into existence. Now you're inside that possibility, just like you're inside of a tunnel. And what happens is you look around and you look for evidence to make what you spoke right. Well, you can find any evidence in the world because, as we talked about in an earlier episode, it's kind of like that picture where there's the old woman and the young woman, and depending on where you look from, one of them shows up for you. If you look from this way, the old woman shows up. But if you look from this point of view, the young woman shows up. Your perspective creates what occurs for you. Everything is there. It's just what occurs for you. What do you see first? Well, we see what we're looking for. And once we've declared something, we look for what we declared so that we can be right. And we will always find it. And as we keep acting in that way and looking for that and creating that, it becomes real. So pretty soon, if we keep saying, I'm shy and I can't do that, we end up years from now acting it out, and it becomes solid and real that we're shy and we can't do that. But it started out just as a statement, a declaration that brought a possibility into existence. And if you think about it, how does a future exist? All a future is a possibility. That's how a future exists. The future isn't out in front of you, down the street and around the corner by the 7-Eleven. If you run really fast, you're not going to run into your future. How a future exists is as a possibility. So now you can start to bring this together and see why I'm saying you're living today in what you spoke last year. You created a possibility. You kind of were consumed by it. You were inside of it. You kept finding ways to prove what you said was right until you're living in it in a real way, and it becomes actually solid and real around you. So what I'm trying to tell you is when you're declaring things, you're actually bringing a future into existence, because how a future exists is as a possibility. So you got to be careful about what you're saying. Listen to yourself. Why would you say, this will never work? Is that where you want to end up? Is that the possibility you want to create as a future? Why not say something that says accurately the way it is right now, but gives you an opening to go to a different future? You might say, this isn't working yet, but I'm sure if I keep working at it, I'll find a way to get it to work soon. So you're not lying about the way it is right now, but you're giving yourself an opening in your declaration that creates a different possibility, one that you want to bring into existence as a future. Okay, so that's the job of declaration. It creates possibilities, and remember how a future exists is as a possibility. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is two distinctions. One's one side of the other, a request and an offer. If you look at it, if you're making a request to someone, you're asking someone to perform for you. You're asking somebody to do something. You're asking something to be done. Well, what's an offer? An offer is something I'm saying I will do for you. I'm offering it. So it's like a quarter. There's heads and tails. Request and offer are the same thing, only different sides of each other. When you're the person making the request, we call you the customer, the person that needs to be performed for. When you're the person offering something, then we call you the performer. But both the request and the offer are distinctions in language, and they have the same job. And the job of a request or an offer is to generate action. In other words, it's the thing that you use if you want to cause action. You don't use assessment and you don't use declaration. That's not their job. That's like the saw and the hammer. They each have a job. Probably you could get it done eventually if you keep beating the person up with a declaration or beating them up with an assessment. Maybe the person will get that you're making a request and it'll cause some action, but there's going to be a mess in there somewhere. But the actual job of a request and an offer is to generate action. So if you want action, we need to have a request or an offer on the table. So think about this situation. You're in a meeting and you're thinking to yourself, nothing ever happens in this meeting. You're saying there's no action. So now you've got your toolbox. You know how to generate action. Now you can say of anybody in the meeting, it doesn't just have to be the person that's leading the meeting. You can make a request, or you can say to someone, do you have a request? Or I'd like to know what your request is. Or do you have an offer? Or I have an offer. In other words, you can put a request or an offer on the table by either asking someone what their request or offer is, or by giving your request or offer. And that's going to start some action. And you can do that with anyone. So even if you want some action by the person that's maybe the head of the department, you can start your request or offer in a lot of different places in the organization. It doesn't have to be just one person that's at the top. You can make a request to a person to please, could they consider putting together a meeting? You could make a request of someone to ask someone else to put together a meeting. But if you say, I think we should have a meeting, that's an assessment. It's telling people what you think. It's just your opinion. It's not a request yet. You need to say something like, my request is, I would like you to do this for me. Would you be willing to do this for me? You need to put it into language in a request or an offer form, not just an assessment. And then 99.99% better chance of having a result of action. So if you want action, start making requests and offers. That's the tool in your toolbox that generates action. Don't just make assessments. Well, I think we should do this. Well, I think the reason this isn't working is because of what happened in the past. Well, I think that the person to blame is the other department. Well, I think this should work. All of those are assessments, and none of those assessments create action or generate action. Requests and offers generate action. So think about that when you're talking. Do you want action, or do you want to create a possibility? What is the purpose of what you're speaking about? And then pick the right tool in your toolbox. That's your move in the game. What goes with a request and an offer, we call a promise. All requests, in order to be powerful requests and generate action, need to have a promise. If you're requesting something from someone, you need to say, are you willing? They need to make a promise. They need to accept or decline your offer or request. If it's just open-ended, then it's not a powerful request or an offer. You need the other side of the request or offer. If I'm a customer making a request, I have to have a performer that agrees to deliver or perform. And how they show me that they will perform is by making a promise. If I'm a performer and I want to generate some action, I make an offer. I find someone who will be my customer, who I can perform for. And then I need to find out from them, do they promise to hold that position in our relationship? One of the jobs a customer has is to tell the performer whether they did the job correctly or not. So I need a partner with me when I'm making a request or an offer. I need either a performer if I'm the customer, or I need a customer if I'm the performer. And we need the promise by the customer or the performer to the request or the offer. And the job of promise is to build trust. It allows somebody to trust you that you're going to get it done or that you're going to deliver. And it builds trust the more that you keep your promise. Now, a lot of people think of promises as just something that's coincidental in life. Oh, I said I promised, but I didn't really mean that I would be at the meeting on time. I mean, I thought I would when I said it, but I had no intention behind my promise. I just promised because I thought you wanted me to say I would be there, so I said that. So we want to really look to see inside of yourself, what kind of person are you in terms of, are you your word? Does a promise mean something to you, or is it just cheap talk? Okay, we're going to take this to a whole new level after the break. So this is Marsha Martin. I'm your host of Talk This Way. And this is being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. See you right after the break.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hey, welcome back. It's Marsha here. I'm your hostess, and this is Talk This Way, live streamed from Bold Brave TV. Okay, we've been working on the distinctions in language and what their jobs are so that you have moves in the game of life. And your moves are in language. And we've covered declaration, request, offer, and promise. Declaration creates possibilities, and how a future exists is as a possibility. So essentially, when you're declaring things, you're creating a future as a possibility for yourself. Requests and offers generate action. If you want to have action, you need to make a request or an offer. If there's no action happening, you need to put your hand up and say, does someone have a request? Or I have a request, or I have an offer. And a promise builds trust. You want more trust in your relationships? Start making and keeping promises. A lot of people think a promise is just something to say to get rid of someone. Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, I'll be there. No, a promise, a different way to hold a promise that really works for you to be an effective human being is to hold it as if who you are is your word. So if you say something, people can count on it. You don't have cheap talk that way. And a lot of people just throw out promises. Sometimes they're sincere, but many times they're not reliable. So if you want to build trust, you want to make and keep promises. Now we come to some very fun distinctions, at least for me. I think these are fun because these are your enrollment tools. Assessment and assertion. An assessment does two things. First of all, it's an opinion. Assessments are never, 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 never true or false. We call them grounded or ungrounded. It means that you have said something that is an assertion that backs up your assessment. Then we say your assessment was grounded. It has more credibility. It's weightier. You can trust it more. It has more solidness to it. But it's still just an opinion. You can never make an assessment into a fact. You can never make an assessment into an assertion. An assessment is always, 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 never, 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 never true or false. It's always an opinion. So you might say, I think Argo, which was a movie, is the best movie of all time. That's an assessment. It's your opinion. But you can make that opinion more solid, more grounded, more credible by backing it up with an assertion. And an assertion can be either true or false. An assertion is something you say as if you can provide evidence. And it's something that a different party than you can go and research or check, and they can find out it's either true or false. So for example, if I make an assertion, there are 12 daffodils in the garden. I'm saying it as if I can provide evidence. And someone can go out and actually count the daffodils and come back and tell me if my assertion was true or false. If there's 13 daffodils, then my assertion was false. If there's 12 daffodils, my assertion was true. So assertions can be either true or false. Assessments are never, ever, ever true or false. They're just grounded or ungrounded. They just have assertions that back them up and make them more credible, or they're just kind of fly-by-night opinions that people throw out there. Assessments have two jobs. The job of an assertion is to ground an assessment. The two jobs that an assessment has, first of all, it's your enrollment tool. It's the way you talk people into things. You make assessments, and if you're really good at grounding them, then you can win people over to your side of the argument. If you say, I think we should merge with this other company, well, that's just an opinion. And then you back it up with some really good financial assertions, then you can talk some of your other members of the board perhaps into agreeing with you and getting on your side of the vote to actually merge with that company. So it's your enrollment tool. you're giving your opinion and you're talking somebody into kind of committing to what your opinion is, committing to what your commitment is. And you do that through assessing it, making an assessment, and then grounding it with an assertion. So your assessment is your enrollment tool. Get good at telling stories. Get good at sharing your opinion in a way that it's grounded, not just fly by night. If you think something is better than something else, have some assertions that back it up. If you ever watch My Cousin Vinny, that movie is the perfect example of a woman who, when she was on the bench in the courtroom, she started off and everybody's assessment of her was she was just a bimbo. But when she started grounding the assessment that she was actually good at cars and automobiles, and she knew what she was talking about, and she could be an expert witness, suddenly she turned from a bimbo into this expert witness just by grounding her assessments. So assessments are your enrollment tool. But they do something else, and this is very important for you to know. And we're going to go in the next few sessions and episodes deeper into some of these, and I'm going to show you how to use them in conversation to produce the result. So this particular episode, we're just kind of telling you what the distinctions are and what their purpose is. An assessment creates identity. You live in the universe as an identity and as who you are. And who you really are is only known by you. Everybody else sees you through their assessments of you. So your identity is created by the assessment that they have. In other words, you live as an identity inside the assessments of the group. Whatever the other person's assessment is of you, that's how you show up for them. So you live as that identity for them. They don't know who you really are. You know that. They have their assessment of you, which creates your identity. For example, how it works is a human being has this really amazing ability to judge, to assess, to interpret. You're a meaning-making machine. Anything can happen in the universe, and you can say, well, that means, well, I know what that meant. Well, I know who he is. You have something that you've interpreted from the action that the person took. They frowned. They smiled. They said something in a particular tone. They walked fast. They walked slow. They put their hand up in the meeting. They sang a song. They laid down and slept. They slouched over. So in the world of action, they're doing things. And you have an interpretation of what that action meant. That's an assessment. Your interpretation of what their action meant is your assessment of them. And once you make that assessment, then that person has an identity. They show up that way for you because they live inside of your assessment of them. So if I see somebody slouched over and I hear somebody say to them, please paint the wall, and that person doesn't move for 5 minutes. Well, the action is the person slouched over, somebody says something to them, they don't move, then they pick up the painting brush and start to paint. I might see that action and say to myself, that person is so lazy. I just made an assessment. I just told myself what that action meant. I made an interpretation. Now, it could have been something totally different. It could have been that the person was meditating and wanted to finish the meditation before they picked up the paintbrush. I don't know. You don't know really what the cause of the action is, or what's going on, or what the meaning is. You make your interpretation just based off your own experience and watching some action. And then you say, oh, I'll add this meaning. Somebody like makes a funny face. It could be they have diarrhea. It could be that they forgot something and they're upset with themselves. It could be that they have a stomach ache. It could be a lot of things. So when you say it means this, that's why I'm saying don't get into trouble and think what your interpretation is what actually happened. The only thing that actually happened was the action. But know this, once you make the interpretation, now that person exists as an identity for you, and you exist as an identity of the assessments of the group. You show up a certain way for them based on their assessments, and they get their assessments by watching you move. And then they make that assessment, and then that assessment is your identity for them. And that's how they operate with you. So we're going to go much deeper into this in future episodes, because this is why it's so important. If you're going to be effective as a communicator and as a human being in life, that you're able to take somebody's feedback and listen to their assessment without taking it personally. If you take it personally, then people feel they can only tell you nice things. They can't tell you what they really think or what they're really adding as their interpretation. You're going to never know how you show up as an identity for them. And that's going to make you less effective. Okay, we're going to take this and cover the last distinctions after the break. I hope you're starting to see how some of this has gotten you into trouble, or why you haven't produced the results that you wanted, or how you have been using different speech distinctions in the wrong way, like the saw and the hammer. You might be beating on the wood instead of just sawing it in half effectively. Okay, I'm your host, Marsha Martin. This is Talk This Way, and we're being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. See you right after the break.
Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery, or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation.
Welcome back. You made it back. This is Marsha Martin. I'm your host of Talk This Way, and we're being live streamed from Bold Brave TV. Okay, we've got 3 distinctions in language left for me to explain what their jobs are: apology, complaint, and expressive. Let's take expressive first. Expressive is when you're sharing from your heart, and it's when you're expressing yourself in some way that shows people who you are. It's also your enrollment tool, and it's also your authenticity tool. It's also something that allows people to trust you. And it's when you're feeling vulnerable, you know, that feeling where you're sharing something and you're just being really heartfelt. That particular way of sharing allows people to get close to you and to connect. And it allows people to trust you and to be with you, and to, so you can see how that will allow you to enroll also. But it does more than just enrolling. It lets people see who you are. I love the movie Avatar when they would always say, I see you. So when you use an expressive way of sharing yourself, you're allowing people to see you. And that opens up all sorts of amazing possibilities for you to create relationships, for you to create interactions, for you to create results and collaborations with other people. Apology, and I want you to know, apology is not when you say, I'm sorry. When you say, I'm sorry, that's an assessment of how you're feeling. You're saying, I'm feeling sorry. Whereas an apology, I apologize, is a move. It's something that you do in the game to cause a particular result. You're not just sharing how you feel about yourself. You're not just sharing an opinion. You're actually making a move. And what the move does is it clears space. If you have something between you and the other person, if you're upset or they're upset, or there's anger or grief or resentment, all sorts of emotions can get in between each other and disconnect us. When you say, I apologize, it clears space. It's a move that does a particular job. It's not just that you're saying you're sorry. And you don't have to be wrong to apologize. If you understand what I mean by it's a move and you need to clear space, then you can just say, hey, I apologize. I apologize for lots of things, as much as I can, for everything I can, because it works to clear space when there's something between me and another person. I don't have to be right. It's not about that. And I don't have to be wrong in order to apologize. I can just say, hey, I apologize. I can see something upset you. I apologize. Clear space. A complaint is a move that needs a request or an offer with it to be effective. There's nothing wrong with complaining. A complaint is a concern. So when you say, I have a complaint, you're saying, I have a concern. When people come up to you and complain to you about what they don't like, they're saying they have a concern about that. They're giving you feedback that this particular way or thing is not working for them. So you want people to share their complaints, and you want to be able to share your complaint. Also, you want to be able to share your concerns, but it's not effective unless you also have with it a request or an offer. Bring a solution that you're suggesting. Bring something to the table. Otherwise, you're just whining. And just whining about something, having a pity party and complaining, doesn't move anything. And that's your move in the game, is to be effective. So if you want to complain, then, and it's good to complain because you need to tell people what's not working, complain powerfully. A complaint is an assessment plus a request. You're saying, I like this or I don't like this. This isn't working for me. That's an assessment. And my request is, and then add a promise. Or this isn't the way I think that we should do it. I think we should do it a different way. You're sharing a complaint. You're saying this isn't working for you, and then make an offer. I'm willing to do this, and I promise, and add a promise to it. So a complaint is effective. It's when you have an assessment of something that's not working, and you add either a request or an offer plus a promise. And then that will cause a resolution and or a solution to something, will move the ball down the field. You'll be interacting with people on purpose, and you'll be much more effective. So now we've covered all of the different distinctions. In the next episodes, and as we go deeper into this journey together and Talk This Way, I'm going to give you examples and show you how to take those and put them together and produce results. But I want to give you an assignment this week. I want you to practice some of these particular speech actions or distinctions. So first of all, I want you to think about when you're declaring something. Start listening to how you speak to yourself or to others, but especially how you speak to yourself. I can't do this. I'm not good at this. This won't work. Oh, I'm never going to have this. Those are all declarations. And remember, declarations bring things into possibilities, create possibilities, and how a future exists is as a possibility. So start noticing things you're declaring that maybe you don't want to create, and think of a different way to say it so that it has an opening to a different future. So start being aware of your declarations. The other thing is make an assessment and make a request and make an offer this week so that you can begin to feel the difference between them. When you say, I really want us to get together next week, that's an opinion. I want you to notice the difference between when you're just making an opinion or when you're actually making a request or an offer. And the last thing is start to notice the difference between when something is happening and you're interpreting what it means. So start listening to how you're speaking. If you say, oh, that person is lazy, when somebody asks you what happened and you say, he was lazy and he didn't get the job done. Well, he was lazy is not what happened. He was sitting on the chair, slumped over, and you interpreted that it meant that he was lazy. There's the action, and then there's the interpretation of the action. Start noticing when both happen. Hey, I've really enjoyed being with you, and I love that you're here with me, and I hope to see you next Tuesday at 5 o'clock Eastern, right here, being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. I'm Marsha Martin, your host of Talk This Way. Have a great week.
This has been Talk This Way with Marsha Martin. Tune in each week and discover that the effectiveness of your communication dictates the quality of your relationships, the profits of your business, the results you produce, and your overall success in life. Tuesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Bold Brave TV network.